Earlier this year, in fact, I think in February, the Ministry of Health said that there were no plans to change the classification of ecstasy in New Zealand. It came after Australia's medical regulator approved psychedelics like MDMA, or what we know as ecstasy, to be prescribed by authorised psychiatrists for the treatment of certain mental health conditions. And the move made Australia the first country to recognise psychedelics as medicines. In New Zealand, a new collaborative trial from Otago University, the University of Auckland, Mana Health, I don't know what that is, but there you are, and the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychological Studies, MAPS, hopes to, in actual fact, achieve what the Australians have achieved in here and get New Zealand to reconsider. Otago University Psychological Medicine Chair, Professor Paul Glue, joins us now. Paul, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Paul, did you and I at Arana Hall together, Otago University, 1970s?
1975, 1976.
76.
I can remember letting off a lot of skyrockets Unicol, and you were part of the team.
I remember that, and I remember getting into serious bother. In fact, I think I ended up in front of the university's senate, but I think you must have escaped that. You were far too bright. You probably ran quicker, did you?
I was just lucky, I think. You know, there's the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught.
Yes.
And it happened.
Yeah, no, good on you. And you've done. Listen, it's fantastic to see you've done so well, and that you've at psychological medicine as a psychologist, and you're professor as well. Good on you. But that's not quite. Although nostalgia is always a good thing. Why you're here today, Paul? You've been researching psychedelics, and as I understand it, and thinking that it's time for us to end our banning of them because they have so many potentially therapeutic benefits. Could you take us through that, please?
Sure. Well, for the last 10, 11 years, we've been doing a lot of research on a legal drug called ketamine for depression, for anxiety, for post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's been highly effective. It's a incredibly useful drug. And for the last 5 years, we've been trying to set up a trial of a different psychedelic, in this case MDMA. And it's taken a really, really, really long time to get ethics approval, import permits, these sorts of things. And the group of patients we wanted to test it out in were people with who are at the end of their life. They've got terminal illness, in this case cancer. They're sad, they're anxious, they have a fear of death, and there's some beautiful data, both with MDMA and with psilocybin, the ingredient in magic mushrooms, that suggest that patients, about 3/4 of patients, have an excellent response. So if you've got 3 months left to live, you can use all of that time saying goodbye, getting your affairs in order. Whereas with say conventional antidepressants, you might be waiting 6 to 8 weeks before anything happens. So I think the value at a patient level is immense. And as you highlighted, we can do the same thing that Australia did, which is to get these treatments available for appropriate clinical conditions. It's a huge plus for medicine. It's a huge plus for patients.
Yes, and that's the thing that intrigues me, because when I was looking at this, in actual fact, I saw you on television. I went, oh, it's Paul Glue. And then I went and did some research. And the research and the science is pretty clear that there is a lot of psychedelic-assisted therapy that would be of significant health benefit. Why did New Zealand earlier this year decline to get involved?
There could be lots of different reasons. One is there's just no interest. They don't see it as a vote getter. There may be too much going on and to distract them from this sort of work. I would like to think that having some well-informed doctors talking to people at the Ministry of Health or relevant ministers would actually count for something. I just don't see there's any enthusiasm or will to change things at the moment.
Yeah, but I mean, you're a professor. You're a psychological medicine professor. You've got a large amount of clinical support, not just from New Zealand, but particularly from overseas jurisdictions. Why would there be a reluctance from public health officials to stop you, Paul, and others exploring and investigating the potential beneficial effects which have in actual fact been demonstrated repeatedly overseas? I don't understand why there would be a block to stop you as a university professor from Otago University conducting the kind of research that I would have thought is why we have universities.
So doing research, no problems. It's just a lot of hoops to jump through. Getting a drug import permit is very tedious, but then going the next step and saying you could use this outside of a research protocol is a bridge too far. I don't think that there is any interest at all in doing what Australia has done and making these drugs or these medications available for broader clinical use.
Which means, but the interesting thing is now that a large number of New Zealanders are dying, obviously, in exactly the circumstances you're describing. What I'm hearing, and I guess as a result of seeing this news program, you'd think to yourself, wait on, if I get some ecstasy or some magic mushrooms, I may be able to alleviate my suffering. Is that something that you think might be independently pursued by people in their end of life anyhow?
So this is where the psychotherapy side comes in, that if you go off and take a couple of mollies on a Friday night, you will get the sort of the buzzy, I'm in love with everyone feeling, but the next morning when you wake up, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, those symptoms won't have disappeared. So what the psychedelics seem to be doing is that they foster a process called neuroplasticity. Yeah. Literally a change in wiring of the brain, and once that's combined, that makes it much more possible for difficult thoughts, difficult feelings to be addressed. Whereas if you just do the psychotherapy on its own or just do the MDMA on its own, you don't get the same results. So the combination is really important.
Okay, you've raised this issue publicly now, which is in part why you're also on the show this morning, Paul. But where do we go to from here? Is there do you need a political decision from a sympathetic health minister? Or do you just need the bureaucrats to get their mind around a little bit more imaginative solution?
So I think a little bit of both. One of the big things is the Misuse of Drugs Act, which was put in place in the mid-70s, is not fit for purpose anymore. So there are certainly some drugs that we don't want to see really available in New Zealand. Methamphetamine would be one, heroin, fentanyl, but it also incorporates magic mushrooms. It incorporates MDMA, where there might be some useful clinical activity. So getting the law change would be one. The second thing would be also getting an acknowledgement from the Ministry of Health that yes, there is a medical use for these drugs. So I think there are at least a couple of changes that would have to happen to make this work.
It took an awful long time for medicinal cannabis to be given a sort of quasi-legality as it has at the moment. Really, too long. Do you anticipate a similar length of journey, Paul, before we actually get to the inevitable conclusion that this isn't such a bad thing?
There are so many unknowns and unknowables in that statement. We're also in the process where the government is rewriting the Mental Health Act at the moment.
Right.
And once a proposal gets into the House of Parliament, it can lurch off in multiple different directions. And this is what happened in 1992 when the existing Mental Health Acts got passed. So there are so many variables, and often it's down to one or two people who may ask difficult questions or put odd things into the legislation. Look, I'm hopeful, but it may well be the next generation of psychiatrists that get to have this as a treatment option rather than as a research project.
Now, this is a trial that you're conducting that is a research project, if you like. You've got approval to go, have you?
Yep. We've got approval to go. We've got we've got all the bits and pieces in place. We've got drug supply. We've got all the permits we need. We are actively looking around for the first patients to enrol, and it is quite a challenging protocol that, as well as the MDMA plus psychotherapy. There's a lot of follow-up. There are a lot of questionnaires to fill out. So it's having someone who's not just willing to participate, but is medically stable enough to participate is another key consideration.
So you're looking at people who are dying, essentially, who have been given a prognosis that they will die, and you're looking for them to be your subjects for this trial, yes?
Yes, correct. And that they've got to be anxious, they've got to be depressed, they've got to be medically fit enough that they have a life expectancy of at least 3 months. There are certain medications they can't be on because of the possible interactions with MDMA. So it's a lot of care goes into selecting just the right people.
Is it just cancer? Because I'm thinking of motor neuron and Huntington's and a series of other diseases as well that are obviously going to be ending people's lives.
We made a very, very clear decision that this would be cancer rather than any other sort of life-threatening medical illness.
Right.
Just to have some sort of homogeneity within the patient population.
And you're looking for, what's your sample size?
We need a total of 32 people. We've got a site up in Auckland as well as a site down here in Dunedin, and hopefully we'll pick up an adequate number of people down here.
All right. Paul, thank you very much for talking to us about this. It's a shame when there is so much international evidence already as to the benefits that we have to go through this process in New Zealand. It does my head in sometimes, mate, but I guess it does your head in as well too. Yeah.
Look, I'm hopeful. We can still do research with this. It's not banned outright. So it's the first step in what I hope is a not too long journey.
Good on you. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. That is Professor Paul Glue from the Psychological Department of Otago University. Yes, I know. Doesn't it sound strange? Here I am advocating ecstasy but if you actually do a quick study of ecstasy and the active ingredient that Paul talked about in magic mushrooms, you'll see that there is enormous therapeutic benefit for folks suffering from a variety of psychological illnesses. Depression is one, anxiety disorders is another, and the Australians moved, as they usually do, a lot quicker on this and decided to give a prescribing facility to Australian psychiatrists. So you can't go to your GP and get them, but you can go to a psychiatrist. In pretty much the same way, actually, can I give you an analogy, as the prescription of Rubifin and Ritalin for sufferers from ADHD. I don't know if you're aware, but if you are a child or if you're an adult that suffers from ADHD, you need a psychiatric, not a psychological, a psychiatric diagnosis first. And the drugs are very carefully protected. You have to, they can only give you a month's supply at one time. And then your GP can prescribe you new drugs at the end of that month. But the GP can't look at you and go, listen, I might have a bit of a specialist in psychology, I understand this, I've seen it with my patients, off we go. You've got to go to a psychiatrist. And getting access to a psychiatrist in this country is not easy. It's one of the benefits of living in Dunedin, actually. You've got Department of Psychological Medicine, and all those psychiatrists who are actually at the Department of Psychological Medicine at Otago University, actually many of them have private practices. I think it's probably one of the few advantages of living in Dunedin, but that's just me. 0800 33 22 83 if you want to comment on any of these issues this morning. 0800 debate or text 5050. Yes, I'll come back straight after this. Morris & Morris Funerals in Whangarei, one of the principals of that particular organisation, and that is Kerry Griffin. Kerry, good morning to you. Before we even start, how do I get to you? Have you got a website?
Well, first of all, phone number is on the top of my head, call 0800 Morris, which is